and today's episode is called Cookie Jar Stacking. You know, there was something that was done in the old days, for those of you who are older or have spent time talking to your grandparents or great-grandparents. The way that things used to work in the old days, especially during and after the Great Depression, is that credit was really not so much of a thing. Perhaps buying a home, that would have been, one exception. But for the most part, the older generation got what they needed by saving. And I know that this is converse to what our current economy is, where we basically buy most things on credit. And that's because 70% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, yet they need some of the modern conveniences like... But it was not that way 70 years ago, 80 years ago. Every family had a cookie jar, or they had a coffee tin, or they had another place that they could squirrel away money. And what they would do when they needed something is they would begin saving for it. And they would put their dimes, their pennies, back when a penny actually had value, or a nickel could buy a candy bar, a quarter could buy a gallon of gas, etc. So back in those days, change was more important than it is today. So, if I say pennies and nickels, well, you may want to think dollars. But every family had a cookie jar or something approximating that. And whenever they got paid, they would put a little bit of money in that cookie jar. It might have only been a quarter. It might have been 50 cents or $1. But over time, they would save for what they needed. And, believe it or not, even those people living in very, very modest situations could still put away a little bit of money. And then when they needed new shoes for the kids, or they needed to make repairs to their car, they would go to the cookie jar. And of course, there was a great distrust for banks in the old days, but some people use banks as well. Well, I'm trying to equate this today. So if you are among one of the 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, then you may want to consider this form of stacking, whether it be stacking your dollars for an unforeseen event, or stacking silver and gold. And of course, I always recommend having a safety net, cash on hand for an emergency. But if you're just not able to get there, I would encourage you to sock away your spare change. All right. Most people I knew also had a Sparklets bottle. Back in the old days, we used to have to lug those Sparklet bottles around because that was the way that we all got fresh water. And sometimes they were glass, but then they turned to plastic. But over time, you could put your change into that Sparklets bottle, or that cookie jar, or that coffee tin. And believe it or not, it does fill up. Even when you're broke, you can somehow empty out your pockets and put what's left over of the day, or what little money that you might spend on a Red Bull or a Starbucks or some other thing that you think you need in the moment, but you don't really need. And if you were to take the same approach to stacking silver, you could definitely put away a little bit of money every day, your spare change, your spare dollar bills, and over the course of a few days, a week, or a couple of weeks, you could afford a Silver Eagle. And, bop on down to the local coin store and go ahead and convert that into that Silver Eagle. Or if you think you can do it in a reasonable amount of time, save up enough for a tube, or perhaps a 1/10 ounce of gold. And, it is just that we as a country have gotten out of the habit of putting away money. There's always some new expense. Everything is so expensive today. But still, I still would recommend squirreling away any money you can and just beginning a very modest stack. So use the cookie jar, use the sparklets bottle, whatever means you can to put away a little bit of money. And before you know it, you will have that tube of silver eagles. And what's nice about converting the change into something like silver coins or fractional gold is you're less likely to spend it, right? You're less likely to go to the cookie jar, break the piggy bank, empty it all out, and, you know, get that smartphone you've been waiting for. Once it's been converted into silver or gold, you become attached to it, and you will want to keep it. So that's a food for thought for the day. And for those of you from the older generation, does that sound right, what I'm saying? Did your parents buy things on credit, or did they save for them? Did they put away no matter what small amount of money they made? And in those days, it was barely anything. Minimum wage was just really, if they were on a minimum wage job, it was incredibly low. But if you do squirrel away a little piece of it before you start spending that check, before you call Postmates to deliver, that Jack in the Box shake, or before you take that, drink at the bar that's going to cost you $10, put something in the cookie jar. How about that? All right, everybody, would love to hear your perspective on saving if you're broke. Okay, you're living paycheck to paycheck. How would you go about saving? Thanks, everyone.